My name is Davis Wardwell. I'm 18
My
years
name's
old.
Lisa
My name is
Hannon.
Noah Blunt. I'm the student pastor here
Trio
at Northside.
Quinn. I'm actually Charlie's cousin.
David Thomas, here with Charlie.
Austin Gregory. Thank you for having
My
me.
name is Donovan
My name is
Jones.
Micah Aver. I'm a student at Lounge High
All
School.
right. Well, Mr. Charlie, you're going to lead us out here tonight on your Young Minds podcast.
All right, welcome back to the podcast, and I'm so glad to have our next guest on with us. If you could introduce yourself, and we'll just keep on rolling.
All right. Well, my name's Jason Spell. I'm the associate pastor here at First Baptist Church in Lake Park, Georgia, and just decided to be on here with you, Charlie, today.
Yeah, man. And you know, if you don't remember, if you went back and listened to the hurricane episode that I did back, what was it, October? I think we were discussing that before we started. Pastor Jason was actually on it for a short little segment. And I remember doing it, and I just kind of like walked up behind you, and you were probably thinking, like, what in the world does he want me to do? But, again, I thank you for doing that.
Absolutely.
You know, 'cause that was really, really cool. And then we got to meet, and now we're doing a full episode with you.
Oh, man, it's so amazing.
Yeah, and I would highly recommend you go check out Mr. Jason in that episode, along with everybody else, because it was really, really cool to see the community come together. But, man, what is your testimony?
Well, man, I have kind of crazy testimony for some. For others, it's not so crazy, maybe. A lot of people, and not so crazy as far as how I came to Christ, but after coming to Christ and called to ministry and things like that, things got interesting for me. But I grew up not too far from here, a little town called Lakeland, Georgia. So I'm a Lanier County Bulldog at heart, red and black, so it's easy to cheer for Georgia, of course. Went to high school there, and about the age of 12, we would always have at my little hometown country church, Good Hope Baptist Church. Man, love that place. Love the people there still. Consider them family, and thankful for my pastor that was there, Brother A.M. Anderson, who was a pastor there for over 50 years. And anyway, we would always have the old annual homecoming service. And but we would combine our homecoming service on Sunday with a Monday through Wednesday revival as well. And so I was about 12 years old. We had homecoming and we had that revival services. And I remember on that Wednesday night, it was our associational missionary, for the Valdosta Baptist Association at that time was actually our speaker. I remember on Wednesday night, just really, even at 12 years old, feeling so convicted over my sin. And maybe not even knowing all that was, just knowing something in my heart was not right. And I held on to the back of a pew as white knuckle tight as I could. And I can vividly remember even now being at my house preparing for the next school day to go to bed and be ready for the next day, and being in tears over the fact that I didn't respond to that feeling. And my prayer that night was simply this: Lord, if you'll let me live till Sunday and make me feel that way again, I'll move.
Whoa.
And it was just kind of, so maybe that is a crazy testimony. I don't know, but I lived till Sunday.
Right.
And at the end of that service, I have no clue what was preached that day, but I could feel that same feeling in my chest and in my heart that just something wasn't right. And knowing that sin is a problem, and I responded that day to the gospel and was baptized about a week later, so pretty quick turnaround on that. But it was a profession of faith and not a lot of walk in faith for me at 12. I mean, at 12 years old, the world's different today, of course.
Yeah.
We have to admit. So at 12 years old then, country boy, there was a lot of things you could get in trouble for, but man, I really didn't have a terrible home life. Had great parents, had a great family, in church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. But as far as opening the scriptures and walking with the Lord on a daily basis, that I really didn't understand what that was for a long time. So it took several years leading into high school, had a youth pastor step in my life at that point and really taught me what it was like to say, hey man, you need to open the Bible every day and read and just have a relationship and a conversation with Jesus, memorize scripture, do these things. It's not just a Sunday and a Wednesday thing, it's an everyday thing. And man, it just radically transformed my life. And that happened between my junior and senior year in high school. So I'm saying that there was a profession of faith in Jesus at 12. And then there was just a radical life transformation of walking with Jesus that happened about my junior year in high school. Yeah.
Wow. And, for me, it was kind of the same way. When I became saved, it was around 10th, 11th, 12th grade. And it's pretty wild, just to think it's almost been 3 years now. And then you look back and it's like, oh my gosh, it's been that long,
Yeah.
So that's really, really cool to hear. And now we're going to go into stuff that pertains to today. So how did you come to First Baptist Lake Park? Out of all the churches, there's a lot to...
Yeah, so that's where my story gets really crazy for some. And I'm just thankful for the journey that God's taken me on and what he's taught me in that. So really learning to walk with Jesus through my senior year in high school. I had I had a youth pastor that stepped in that was so important to my life. My parents were very instrumental in my faith, of course. And but I had a friend that moved into Lanier County. His dad was a Methodist pastor in Lakeland. And I didn't have a youth group at my church. So that was part of the issue. I think probably I really didn't know what it was like to walk with Jesus because I was technically really the only teenager in my country church.
Yeah.
I was there. I'm the only one that was in that age group. So when this friend moved into the school system, they invited me to their youth group. And so I started attending my Southern Baptist church on Sunday mornings, and I was attending Methodist youth group on Sunday nights and Wednesday nights. But man, I was building relationships. I was learning what it was like to walk with Jesus. And I had some significant men step in my life and just say, hey, I want you to know that there's just something special about you, and I feel like God may have a call on your life. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. I don't even know what that means, Okay, I'm going to go be an accountant. That was my goal. That was my dream. And I was good with math. I hated reading. I hated writing and things like that. So math, accountant. I'm going to go do people's taxes, right? And make lots of money. But I had a few significant men, like I say, step into my life and just say, man, there's something special about you. And I really feel like God's got a call on your life. And, I just kind of blew it off. But at the same time, stayed open to it. And in March of my senior year in high school, so March of 1996, I went on a college tour with my friend to a university called Oral Roberts University in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So here I am, Southern Baptist church guy. That's where I grew up, going to a Methodist youth group, and I went and visited a charismatic university. And you can kind of see that, man, you're turning into a bag of mixed nuts already, So, and I went to Oral Roberts for that visit, and it was in that visit that I really felt like I could sense that God had something more than accounting for me. That he had put his hand on my life in a special way, that these guys that were telling me that were just being sensitive to maybe what God was speaking to their hearts. And at that moment, coming home from that weekend, I had a Sunday night that I was doing some algebra homework, doing math homework at my desk. And I really sensed the Lord speak to my heart and say, I'm calling you in full-time ministry. And you can look to your left, and there's a desk that's sitting on the side of my office, and that's the desk that I was sitting at when I felt like the Lord called me into ministry.
Wow.
And I was doing algebra homework, of all things. And so my life completely changed within just a few short months before graduation. And I surrendered to that call. Went to Oral Roberts University for 4 years. Youth pastored in Oklahoma for another 3 years before I was called back to First Baptist. And the story gets even more interesting. I really felt like God was had done what he wanted to do with me at the church that I was at in Oklahoma. I'd been there for 3 years. Felt like I was kind of spinning my wheels a little bit. Thought God might have something more for me. And I resigned from my church on a Sunday.
Ooh.
And then in the resignation, I said, Lord, I don't know what you're doing, but I just believe that you've got some different place for me, and I feel like I need to resign. And in the time of resignation, I said, between now and the time that resignation period is up, so giving my notice of wanting to move on to a different ministry somewhere else, I said, if I don't have a job, I said, I'll just move back home, and then we'll figure it out from there. So didn't have anywhere to go. Just knew that my time was up. Resigned on a Sunday, and on Tuesday night, I got a call from somebody that I hadn't talked to in a long time, who was the pastor at First Baptist Church here in Lake Park at that point, and said, hey, would you be interested? We're looking for a student pastor. Would you be interested in coming to interview? So from Sunday to Tuesday. And of course, I said, yes. And so that pastor was another person that was super instrumental in my life. And he's the pastor at Southside Baptist Church in Lakeland. Now his name's Austin Deloach. And he pastored here at First Baptist in Lake Park for about 6 months.
Wow.
And in the course of that 6 to 7 months, I was hired here, and he moved back to Southside. So it was just kind of a crazy transpiring of events. But that's how I ended up back in Lake Park, and I've been here for 21 years now. So
and we talked about it before. It's wild to hear about like how a lot of pastors know each other around here. Like, like before we were saying, like, Austin Gregory, at the bridge, and that's really, really cool. Like, and I didn't know that, but it's really cool to say, like, well, this guy knows this person or whatever, and they've been on the podcast. It'd be cool and it's cool to make those connections every time that I interview somebody new.
Sure.
And for everybody else that's listening, hey, they know each other now, and a bunch of people that I've interviewed, which is really, really neat.
We should be careful how we treat people, because you never know who knows somebody else.
Right. It's like, they told so-and-so told me about you, and, you're acting all like different from what they said, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
But, what was your journey like, to become a pastor? Like, out of, you kind of talked about your call, but what was that like? Once you stepped into that call, what was that like?
Man, I'll tell you what, I can't imagine me doing anything else now. Like I told you earlier, I hated reading, and I hated English and writing, and now I loved math, and now it's completely the opposite.
That's about you're doing that now. We're writing sermons and reading the Bible.
That's all I do is read and write, and and things like that. And I absolutely hate math. I still now the OCD in me likes order, and I like things to have a right answer, and I like everything to have its place. But as far as math and taxes, what I was going to do for a living, man, I let somebody else do my taxes, brother.
Yeah.
I don't want anything to do with it. And I'm glad. It's so funny that sometimes what we think that we want, God has a completely different story for that.
Yep.
And when we surrender to what God wants, He begins to help us to discover things that we never knew we loved. And it becomes our life,
Yeah.
And so, man, I'm just thankful. In my journey to become a pastor, I'll tell you this. I'm thankful for men that gave me a shot. I'm thankful for the Steve Posey, who was my best friend's dad, who let me preach my first sermon. I'm thankful for a youth pastor named Brenton Barker, who's still in Valdosta, believe it or not, crazy as I'll get out, who gave me a shot and believed in me to be able to share devotion in a youth group, who came to my school and ate lunch with me, who encouraged me when I was down, and still I could pick up the phone right now and he would answer. I'm thankful for men that believed in something in me, because I think that in that calling aspect, a lot of times we need someone else to see it in us first.
Yep.
And call it out of us. Call us to a higher level. Call us to something greater. Because we will always be satisfied with status quo if we don't have somebody call us higher.
Yeah. And
I would have been satisfied with status quo and a lot of worldly things if somebody hadn't called me to something greater.
Yeah.
So I'm thankful for those things, and then for a pastor that's even here now that shares his pulpit with me, to let me be able to do the thing that I know gives me life. I mean, we get to teach and preach every single Wednesday night to our students, of course, but then to share a Sunday morning pulpit, that's a strategic time in the life of a church. God does special things on Sunday mornings when God's people gather to worship Him, and that He doesn't do in morning personal devotions.
That's right.
It's not that He can't. but he chooses to do those on Sunday morning worship service when his people gather.
Yeah.
And to be able to share and open up a pulpit like that and give, well, I'm not so young anymore, but I think I'm young. Immature,
Young at heart,
immature guys a shot. And I just had so many people that believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself, and I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, and that is like whatever you're doing, especially with ministry, whatever it is, that is one of the key things. I think you need people to stand behind you. Because there's been plenty of times where I'm like, am I going to be able to get this number of episodes out or whatever? And then I go talk to my accountability partner or whatever, and he's like, pray about it, and I'm praying for you too. And then, but you got this,
That's right.
Like, because there's been tons of, especially, I don't know, I think and I don't know if you felt this too, as like, you've gotten into ministry and you've, continuously walked through it.
Right.
Like every year for the podcast, as it gets bigger, it gets harder for me to, focus on everything.
That's right.
Right. And so, like, I'll tell you this right now, if there's anybody, that's wanting to pray for anything for me right now, just pray for, like, for the podcast to stay steady, and my mind to stay steady for one thing.
Yeah.
Because you can get overwhelmed and things like that, especially. And I mean, this is just my example, but at a young age, because a lot of people going into ministry, they start at a young age, and then they stop because like they felt like they were overwhelmed with whatever was going on or thrown at them. But if they would have just stuck with it for, let's say, 6 more months, God would have been like, look at this amazing opportunity I was fixing to give you, but you didn't stick with it.
Yeah.
And so
there would have been a breakthrough of something. Sometimes we have to go through the adversity of the challenge of ministry, but just on the other side of it, there's the breakthrough to where there's freedom, and there's a little bit of the weight that we carry. We realize that he's lifting that, but he puts that weight on us even at times so that we learn to trust him.
That's right.
Absolutely.
That's right.
And Charlie, here's one of the amazing things about ministry, and even with the podcast, is consistency. A lot of people don't celebrate consistency well. We like to celebrate the excellent big thing.
Yeah.
And I can do big things. You can do big things in ministry and do special things. But if that's what we build the basis of our ministry on, then eventually we're going to hit a lot of valleys, because we don't live on the mountaintops.
That's good.
A lot of times we live in the valleys, and it's in the valley that you just have to be consistent with what you know to do, and you keep trudging. And it's not doing more, it's not doing harder, it's not trying harder, it's just being consistent in what I know I should do. And it's not overloading our plates, learning how to say no when it's okay to say no.
Real. Like that is one of the biggest things for me. Yeah. Just because like I volunteer at Northside every now and then. And I love to help this person and that person, and I'm like, hold on, I gotta like chill out. Like, because sometimes too, for me, like I love helping with those ministries, but I've got to focus on mine. Like God's given me this one to focus on. So I can't be putting all of my time into this one when I've got my own over here that I need to focus on.
That's right.
And like, that's one thing for sure that I've been like, I've got to learn to say no more, like in a positive way.
And seasons of life will bring that. I've learned to say no better as my seasons of life had changed, as family comes, as school schedule changes, different things like that. And I've learned, I used to get so frustrated, even with just the idea that I'm not doing everything every other student ministry is doing.
Yeah.
I don't need to do everything every other student ministry is doing, because they're already doing it.
That's right.
And I just need to be who we are, be consistent. And if you walk through the doors of our student ministry, you know what you're going to get. Yeah. Let's be consistent. And then the excellent things take on a greater weight and a greater life. But you know that doesn't have, that's not the expectation. It's the consistency of, man, we're going to do this week in and week out, and we're going to let God do what he wants to do. I think a lot of times in ministry, student ministers, pastors, whatnot, they burn out because they think they have to do more.
Like, to get more people in or whatever, they think.
Absolutely. Got to be bigger, got to be better, got to be greater. And God's always into bigger and better things. Yeah. But that's what God does. And he just wants us on the journey sometimes, I think we put way too much weight on us carrying glory when we're not meant to carry glory. We're made to reflect it.
That's right.
Man, we're made to point to the one who is glorious.
Yeah.
If I can just, whatever I do, point towards him, it makes what I do more significant because it's not about me at that point. Yeah.
And you're talking about like doing bigger and better things, like the people kind of like gets in their mind. I mean, of course, just one style of church makes me think of that.
Yeah.
Mega churches do that. They do that a lot. Like, you see all the stuff they're doing. It's like, you wonder, where did that stem from? And they're obviously a normal-sized church at one point, and then did somebody was like, well, we're going to do this and that and this and that and this and get it bigger. And then now you've got a pastor flying on wires. I mean, people laugh at it as a joke, but it happens. That's a thing. And that's something you have to watch for, And
I think about like this. I mean, we take students to camp every year, and camp tends to be a beautiful thing where God transforms lives, but there is a production aspect to a lot of camps.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's when I come home and I try to reproduce camp when I'm not camp.
Right, yeah.
That all of a sudden I'm not who I am. I took students to a camp, and I want Jesus to meet them there. And Jesus uses the gifts and the talents of production people to help bring an encounter with the Lord. It's that when I try to replicate that and think that's how I have to do this thing to make God or to see God move or to make him move, or I'm trying to, anticipate and expect something that, man, this isn't who I am. And I can't replicate that. So then it looks silly. And
especially with young people, they're going to be able to know that.
Yeah.
Because they want realness, right? Absolutely. They're going to know if you're being fake or if you're trying to be all hip and cool and all that. Like, they know that.
I'm the most uncool guy there is.
Well, hey, but they obviously love you. I've seen the pictures, So, but I mean, that's what I had a friend of mine. He was like, yeah, man, I'm going to speak with a youth group, whatever. You got any advice for me? And I said, be real.
Absolutely.
Or, if it's youth or college or whatever, that age group, of young people, don't fake it.
That's right.
Because, I mean, they can tell,
Here's, and people may disagree with this idea or not, but here's, when I'm able to share and speak, especially with groups that may not know me, my goal or the one thing that I want to get across is that they know that I believe what I'm saying. First and foremost. I believe. I can't make them believe.
Right.
That's the job of the Holy Spirit.
Right.
To draw them to faith in Jesus, to draw them into a deeper walk with Jesus. But Jason, do you really believe what you're saying? Do you believe the message that you may not live that, but I definitely do not live my message perfectly.
Yeah.
And none of us are perfect. I stumble in a lot of ways. My butter slides off my bread often.
I've not heard that expression before. That was good.
But my jelly slides off my biscuit all the time. But I believe, and in my belief, I'm trying to live what I believe, and I don't want my passion to ever come across as fake or worked up. But man, I'm passionate about Jesus, and I'm passionate about His Word.
Yeah.
And I really do believe what I teach. And if I can walk away from a scenario and they say, man, that Jesus that he talked about, I'm not so sure about him, but he believes it. I feel like I've taken them one step closer for the Holy Spirit to do what only He can do, and that's change a life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially because I know, like, if I'm just making FCA as an example, like if you bring somebody that, like if you bring one of your friends or whatever in there that's not a believer, and then you bring a speaker in there, there was one example that was really cool when I came in there the second time go around. So I saw a girl, I think she was a senior at the time. She was a senior when I was coming back. So I, just graduated, and she was a senior now. And I knew her from a class that I'd taken, like the year before. And she wasn't a Christian, but, she'd always hear me out. And she would say that she was, lesbian and everything like that. Please don't cancel me for that, for saying that word, YouTube.
Right.
Please don't get me demonetized, YouTube.
Yeah.
But that's what, she believed. But she always heard me out. Like, she was never rude about the whole thing. Like, some people, they throw it right in your face.
Yeah.
And it's harder to navigate that. She was always respectful about it. Well, then, so, they had the first one, and then I was the second one to come up for the year. And then I come in the door, and she's coming to FCA because a friend invited her. And I was like, okay. Now, this is cool. Because, like, because unless if she's heard about Jesus from anybody else, I was the last time that somebody talked to her about it.
Sure.
And then God put her back in that room to hear what I had to say, because she heard me yap about this podcast, a bunch.
Right.
And then she got to see what I was doing.
Yeah.
That was just, but I just pray that it came across as genuine. I try to all the time.
Absolutely.
But
believe it.
yeah.
I mean, you're sitting across from me now, so I can see you, and you look very genuine.
I appreciate it.
In what you share and what you're doing.
I mean, because I'm not gonna try to use big old words, because that's not me.
Yeah.
I'm not that kind of person, you know. Unless if I have it written out or whatever,
Right.
and I want it to sound more profound, which
Yeah.
it's just a conversation.
That's right.
And so it shouldn't have to be, all these big words that nobody understands, and you have to go and look into a dictionary to figure out what they mean afterwards.
That's right. We tend to use words that Jesus didn't use to share the gospel.
Yeah. And sometimes I have to go like, this was a great message. What does that mean? I don't know what you just said.
That's right.
But what's it like working with young people? You've talked about it a little bit, but what's that like?
It's a never-ending circus.
I bet.
Oh man, it's so much fun.
Is it from 6 to 12? Is that what the age
we
group?
do 6 from 12, and our student ministry is really my focus, and it's so much fun to learn how to communicate the simple truth of the gospel in a way that relates across those age ranges. And it comes down to this. Even for me preaching in a large to our congregation. Yeah. The concept is still the same. Let's make it plain.
Yeah.
Let's tell the simple truths of the gospel. My preaching professor at ORU, one thing he said, if you can't preach in such a way that a 12th grader can understand it, and a doctor's not challenged, he said, go back and rewrite. And I'm like, I want to make it plain to where a 12-year-old can understand the simple truth of the gospel.
Yeah.
And it just clicks. And then a doctor's challenged in the truth of what's just been presented at the same time. And man, we've got to depend on the Holy Spirit again to do that miracle from our mouth to every person's ears. So going back to just talking about working with students, man, I don't have to do anything flashy. No. I think they just want truth, and they want it. They want to believe that you actually, they want to believe that you actually believe that. Yeah. And are you enjoying, doing what you're doing? Do I love them? Do I actually care about them? And I do. And I believe that they don't have to change a thing about their life for me to love them. I think that goes back to your story that you just shared. The reason why that girl's able to even walk in the room and you are there. Somebody invited her, but maybe Charlie Banks's name came up and they were like, man, that was a pretty genuine guy. Yeah. And he wasn't judgmental towards me. He may not agree with me. Yeah. We so often want to cut off relationships because we don't agree with people. Yeah. And God called us to be the light of the world. That's right. And light has to shine in darkness. That's right. That's where it makes a difference. Yep. That's where it wins the battle. But it's just kind of like, well, I can't be your friend because I disagree with you. No, I want to be your friend because I love you, I care about you. And if I really have the truth, man, then I know what I have is going to make a difference. And I want to shine that truth in your life as often and as much as I can, even if it starts with just a little flicker of a candle to become a spotlight, So, man, I just love the journey and the excitement of having to be able to communicate that and not try to compete with people that are around me, other student ministries. Man, just be who we are. Yep. Offer them what we have to offer. And really, when it comes down to it, we only have one thing to offer. I can't out-entertain this world. Yep. I already told you, I'm not the coolest guy in the world. I don't have fancy hair. I don't have fancy clothes. I drive not a very hot rodish type car. I'm a family man with a minivan, so it's all okay. Yep. And it's like, man, I don't think students are drawn to that anyway. Maybe at face value that might get them in a door. Yeah. But what you're reaching with is what you got to keep them with. Yep. And man, I want to reach them with just the foundational truths of the gospel. So
Yeah.
it's an exciting journey every single week.
I bet.
Absolutely.
You know, and you never, since it's such a wide range too, you're having to, like, if somebody comes up to pray, if they're asking to pray, for you to pray for them, you never know what you might get. You might get something like, hey, I've got like a test coming up to, like, hey, like something's going on in my family, and it's just a wide range of, and so you have to figure out how to deal with that,
Sure.
In a biblical way.
We become general practitioners in a lot of ways instead of specialists. So a lot of times ministry for pastors is, I'm kind of like a pediatrician or a family doctor instead of a heart surgeon.
Yeah.
I don't specialize in one area. I've got to know how to counsel with a family issue, how to counsel to get ready for a wedding or a marriage, and do a funeral, and you do all these different things. And now I'm working with students, and now I'm over here working with a grandma. It's like, you got to be a general practitioner in a lot of ways.
Well, you've heard about the church, being a hospital for people.
Absolutely.
So you kind of are,
Yeah, for sure.
And and this is just more of a funny thing, but it's always funny to me to see, like, my pastors or just any pastor that I know out and about in public that's not in their church. Like, because they're usually just wearing, like, like, they're not wearing, like, their suit on Sunday. Like, you're used to that.
Yeah.
And then you're like, this is weird. Like, it's like, I saw Pastor Avi. I saw him out at a restaurant one time, and I was like, this feels weird.
Yeah.
Like, this feels really weird.
Yeah.
But he's the same as he always is, and that's
Absolutely.
the great thing. That what I love is that most pastors that I've met, they don't put that facade on. They're just themselves.
Yeah.
Because God made them the way they are.
That's right. I think a lot of times we tend to put that perception on pastors more than they do themselves. And yeah, man, I try to be as much the same Jason outside of the pulpit as in the pulpit.
Yeah.
And if I really want to throw people off, I just throw on a hat. And I'm like, is that you? Yeah.
Well, I will say a hat is like it. It makes you look different than.
Makes you look different.
It does. And then in that clip when we did, you're not wearing your glasses either. And so.
No, I'm not wearing my glasses.
And so, yeah.
And so if I really want to hide, I take my glasses off and put a hat on to go to Winn-Dixie. But even that doesn't work sometimes.
Reminds me of like Superman over here trying to put that.
That's right.
Put the glasses on. Looking like Clark Kent.
Except there's no super in front of that name. It's just a man.
So then this question's about young people, and this would be great for you since you're working with them.
Yeah.
When you look at the youth today, do you see hope, or are you worried about the future?
Man, I'd be an idiot. Don't cancel me out for that word. I'd be an idiot working with students if I didn't say, man, I was extremely hopeful. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't. There would be no reason for me to do what I'm doing if I wasn't hopeful for this generation. I think it comes down to the fact that they want to see something that's real, and they want something that's truth, and they want something that's gonna be a foundation for their life. And I think we went through a season, and not throwing shade on anybody, where we gave them a lot of glitz and glamour, and it wasn't real Christianity. It wasn't really walking with Jesus. And they're hungry for that stuff. And I'm hopeful. They can change the world.
Yep.
And it doesn't. Hey, Jesus changed the world with 12 uneducated guys. Turned the world upside down.
He did.
But here's the way that they changed the world. It was the gospel. It was the power of the Spirit. But it was this example, and I can't remember the exact place where it is, but it was stated this way: these men have been with Jesus. Mm-hmm. And I think if, as a student pastor, if I can just be with Jesus and then walk into the lives of other people, students included, and they know, man, he's been with Jesus, I want to be with Jesus.
Yep, that's good.
And then they get to be with Jesus. It begins a ripple effect that's just a small pebble in a pond, but man, it ripples huge. And we're not going to win with arguments. We're going to win by loving like Jesus did, serving like Jesus did, compassion like Jesus had, and hearing people's story. Mm-hmm. I want to hear, what are people passionate about?
Yep.
If you ask anybody, if you don't know how to start a conversation about Jesus, you don't even have to start with Jesus. All you got to do is be interested in the person sitting in front of you.
That's right.
And ask them, what are you passionate about? What do you love? They're going to tell you that. And then the second thing you can ask them is what hurts in your life. They'll tell you their passions and they'll tell you their pains faster than anything else. And those are always inroads to saying, I know the person who gave you that passion. I know the one who can heal your pain.
That's good.
Now let's walk together. And we think that it always has to happen in an instant. But man, sometimes it's a journey.
Yeah.
That's what life is. So man, I'm extremely hopeful for this generation.
Yep.
How can I see that? I see that in my own student ministry of just trying to be consistent again and then let God do what he's going to do. And you start seeing gradual life change. Here's the thing that my pastor and I, we've talked about several times. He's been here for 20 years. I've been here for 21. So I got seniority on him. Don't tell him. But we have noticed this, that we see life change in families that most pastors don't get to see because they don't stay. There's something about God does call people to other places and other ministries. I believe that without a shadow of a doubt, that he moves us, he transitions us, that there's a season for us in positions and roles. But sometimes I think, like you say, if we would have just waited, that God would have said, I was about to do this, and you gave up or you moved too quick. We see people in our congregation that it's slow change. But the person that they were when we arrived is not the person they are now.
That's good.
And it was a slow, gradual change. But if I took a snapshot today of who they are and had the picture from 20 years ago, it's a drastic change.
Yeah.
It's just I didn't get to see it as much because it's kind of like I look at my kids every day and I'm like, man, they're the same kids. They're the same kids. But then every now and then I'll wake up in the morning and I'll look at my son or I'll look at my daughter and I was like, I'm looking at my daughter and I'm like, you're not a kid anymore. You're a young lady.
Yeah.
I'm looking at my son. You're not a kid. You're like this tween. And here's the hard thing for me is I have to be my own kid's student pastor. So I got two of my own kids in my student ministry, and they think I'm really uncool. We just talk. If you really want to know who I am, go talk to them, right? That's he's not all that, nor a bag of chips.
But I mean, is that hard for them at all? Like, for them to have a parent in the in ministry like you are in, or?
I don't know. That would be probably a question for
them. I mean, I'm curious because you say that, and it's like, because you're around other kids too, and so.
I think I think for my daughter it might be, Dad, they talk about you more than they do me. Probably not. I don't know. I don't think it's weird. I think it's what they've always known. Yeah. And I think it's me trying to be as consistent at home too. Which, if I'm really honest, man, I feel like such a failure at that. I really do. Because they get the worst side of Jason, and I love them the most. Yeah. They get all the frustration that when I've had a bad day at work, that instead of on the ride home taking that to Jesus, I take it out on them. And don't we do that so often? Yeah. But man, in God's grace and God's mercy, I don't think either one of my two that are in there now, I've got another one that will be there in 2 more years. I don't think God's made them jaded or hateful towards the church. My daughter, she loves to sing. She loves the Lord. She loves her Bible. Yep. And my son is on that journey. Yep. And boys and girls are just different. And man, trying to navigate that. And man, this world's making it harder. But,
not getting.
Yep. So anyway, I don't think that they.
And it's good. I mean, because you have to be.
In it.
Yeah, I mean, because you have to be. Careful of that. I mean, because that can be difficult.
Well, I think one thing that can be hard for kids with parents in ministry is that ministry can steal their parent away from them. Yeah. And I had somebody share some really good advice with me one time, and they said, in speaking of saying yes and no to things, if you want to say yes to something and you can't take your kids to do ministry with you, it's probably a hard no. And I've kind of taken that to heart. There are some things to where maybe there's a retreat or something like that I'm asked to go minister at. It's kind of a closed circle that my family can't go with me.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of a special thing. But for the most point, hey, if I was asked to speak at FCA, hey, can I bring my kids with me even though they don't go to school here? No. Well, that might be a hard no for me because I want them to see me doing ministry and I want them to be a part of that. Look at what Dad is doing and why he's doing it. And guess what? You're not closed off from that. You're a part of that.
That's right. That's
it's
good.
Part of our family. So
that's good. But why do you, in your opinion, why do you think, people, especially young people and like schools, like public schools mainly, why do you think they run away when they hear the name Jesus like brought up in a conversation? Like that's just a common thing, I think, especially now. Not youth groups, of course, but just worldly people. They're like,
Yeah, I think we, man, that's a great question, Charlie, and it can be answered. And you've probably gotten a different answer every time.
I've gotten a different answer every time. Yep.
I'm probably going to just off the cuff go back to something I said earlier.
Yeah.
We want to talk about Jesus and ourselves before we talk about the person sitting in front of us. Mm-hmm. And, there's the old quip that says, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And I just want to know, everybody's got a story.
They do.
So I want to know, what's your story? Because if I don't know how you got to where you are, how can I tell you to get somewhere else how can I connect to getting somewhere else?
Right.
Ultimately the destination, man, we want a relationship with Jesus in heaven forever. But in order to get there, I got to know how you got here. And then maybe I can make that connection. And, we would tend to all be a little turned off or maybe a little hesitant to run the other direction when the first thing somebody tells us is what's wrong with us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Instead of, man, sometimes we got to empathize and sympathize with where people are.
We do, yeah.
Because there's things that's happened in their life and that aren't always their fault. Mm-hmm. But it led them down a path that got them way off course to where if you could go back to a few significant moments, they could be in a completely different place.
Yep.
And I've got to empathize and sympathize with that to get people to a place to where, man, that God can and will change their heart. And it doesn't matter where that journey's taking them. If I really believe that Jesus changes lives today, It doesn't matter what that past story is. He can always give them a different future. But he does care about the past. Mm-hmm. It's not just, he cares about that person because they're created in the image of God.
That's right.
And they're not a mistake. There may have been mistakes made on the path, but the person isn't a mistake. Mm-hmm. And God wants to change and transform that. I relate it to this, that every person, all of creation is almost like, I love to put puzzles together. That's one of my, I don't know why.
I feel like I could see you as a puzzle guy.
It relaxes me. Some people, it frustrates them. 1,000 pieces, what in the world? They're all tiny. I don't see how this fits together. And every piece matters, doesn't it?
Yep.
And if you look at all of creation and what God did in the beginning, he made a beautiful picture. Genesis 1, it comes down to the end of that. God looked at all that he made, and it was very good. It's a beautiful picture. It's the box top. It's the original picture. But you know what? It just took a couple of chapters, and Satan stepped in, deceived Adam and Eve, and it shattered the picture into 1,000 pieces. So see, God's not just a creator. He wants to recreate. Mm-hmm. And he's taking it back to something that was very good. The design's not the mistake. It's that Satan's deceived us into thinking that this is what life is all about. Just look at the one little piece right here. This is the most important. No, it's not. There's a bigger picture. And all these pieces, you may not see them yet, but they're going to fit together. And God can take the squiggly, crooked, rough edges of our lives and he fits them back because he knows what it's supposed to look like even when we don't.
That's good.
He's got the box top. And he's the one that created in the beginning. And he's going to eventually get there. My job is not to change people. It's just to remind them man, there's a beautiful picture being painted here. And your life matters in that story. He created you with purpose and with value, and he created you on purpose. He created you a masterpiece, not a mistake. And man, it's going to all fit together one day. And then it won't be shattered again.
That's good.
But man, in the process of that, it can be difficult.
Yeah.
So I think, and going back to your original question, because
Yeah.
I know I dance around and talk.
Oh,
a lot
you're
about
good. I
issue,
promise. You're good.
But why do people run? I think that they want to see somebody who's real and authentic and really believes what they believe and cares about them.
Yeah. And one of the things I think would be like one thing that we need to be intentional about is when we're approaching somebody like that is, I mean, we need to show them that we still mess up. We might just even have done some of the same things that they are, ashamed of.
Yep.
It's not that we're not ashamed of them, but God's forgiven us for them.
Absolutely.
And we have to, and they could relate to that. It was like, oh, well, even as a Christian, you've done those things. I'm like, yes, we have. But, God forgave us for those, whatever it is.
We have to, and I think about my story, and I think about all the mistakes that I've made in my past. And everybody doesn't need to know about all your mistakes.
Nope.
But they need to know that you're a broken person. And I've been broken in a lot of ways. And when you get broken, it allows the grace of God to shine in our hearts. I mean, you think about this, the miracle of the 5,000, when Jesus fed the 5,000, he took the bread and he broke it. The only way the bread could be shared was because it was broken. And God wants, God, he doesn't throw, maybe here's the important thing. When sin broke that puzzle all to pieces, God didn't look at all the pieces and say, well, let's throw that in the trash. He said, no, now that it's broken, it can be shared.
That's
and
good.
we can put it back together. And we can make it beautiful again. And I want my life to be, I want to be broken bread for others to be able to taste and see that God is good. Man, if he can use me, he can use anybody. If he can change my life, he can change anybody's life. He can do that anytime, anywhere, any place, if we're just open and honest and surrendered to him. Man, his grace shines through. And I think we should not be ashamed that we're broken people. Like I say, we don't have to share every detail of our story.
No.
But I think when someone else is broken in their story and they share that, sometimes that doesn't remind us of our brokenness and our past too. And there's still not just like this little hook of, man, I remember the ugliness of what that felt like. And it brings us to tears almost.
Yeah.
That then we get to be real. And people say, well, hope, And people want hope. Everybody wants hope.
That's good.
And you talked about how, our lives, we messed up in a lot of different ways. That old proverb, from Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge him his way. One version says that.
Yep.
The new CSB says it this way: in all your ways know him, and he'll make your path straight. And I don't know about you, I was reading and
that's really
that
impressive, by the
passage.
way. That's really, I'm just saying that's impressive to me. That because I know other pastors can do that, but know different versions of the Bible, and that's kind of your job. But
yeah.
That's cool. Sorry to interrupt you, but
No. Well,
that's really cool.
In all your ways, know him. Okay, I'm taking a test. I want to know you in taking this test. I'm walking through a family. I want to know you, Jesus, in walking through this. Every obstacle, everything that happens in life, I want to know you more. I'm going to take a step closer to you. But know you, and he'll make your path straight. And I'm like, man, God, I've been trying to know you since I was 12 years old. And really, since a junior in high school, I've been trying to walk with you. And my life looks like you took the stock market graph and turned it sideways. It don't look real straight. My path doesn't look real straight. And there's an old Portuguese, there's my southern accent trying to come in.
It's all right.
There's an old Portuguese proverb that says this. It says that only God can draw straight with a crooked line. And it's that idea that, our lives may zig and zag and turn this way. And man, we mess up a lot. But God's drawn a straight line with our lives that we can see. And he's going to make it all make sense one day. I just want it to make sense right now.
Right. You know, because we're all a little bit impatient, right? And, you know, it's crazy that you bring that verse up because this feels like D Now prep because that's the verse that we're using for our D Now. So
I'll tell you what.
You know.
So you should already have it memorized.
Yeah.
And see, now you can take it and use it. You know, in this one version it says acknowledge him, but you know there's another version that says know him.
Yeah.
You can be the theological guy.
I'm gonna have to because so the person that I joined up with, I joined up with Mikey Gibbons at First Baptist Ray City. He's the youth pastor over there,
right?
Or acting youth pastor over there, and you know, and he's bringing his church into Northside so we can join up for D Now. But he's wanting me to teach a whole part of the lesson, and I've never done that before. But I'm definitely gonna have to go back into this episode and take some because it was what you said is awesome. Well, you
don't even have to give me credit for it because it was all from the Bible. So
I know
it's just yours.
I know. But definitely this was like some D Now prep over here. But
hey, and look at this. There's a guy giving you a shot.
That's right. He is giving me a shot.
He believes in you.
Yeah.
And you just take advantage of it. And you just be Charlie and be consistent.
Yeah.
And man, it's going to happen. And God's going to do what he needs to do through you.
Yeah.
That you can't do. Because you're just going to be surrendered to him.
That's right. That's good.
Yeah.
But for my final question, if you could describe First Baptist Lake Park in one word, what would it be and why?
Man, there's so many words that I could use to describe First Baptist, and I'm gonna describe it this way.
Okay.
Celebratory.
Okay.
So, whatever we do, we just want to celebrate Jesus, and that comes from our small groups, our Sunday morning worship, our student ministry, our kids ministry. We just want people to celebrate Jesus and draw closer to him. There was a guy that said this, and I get credit for saying this here all the time. It was somebody else that said it. But a church alive is worth the drive.
That's good.
We want to be a church that celebrates Jesus in such a way that if somebody has to drive 50 miles to get here, that it's worth their time.
Yeah. And we got to drive 30 minutes every Sunday.
Exactly. So, I find this through, working with FCA and things like that. I don't work for FCA. I just get to be a part of that ministry. That I encounter a lot of students that live on the other end of the county, and it's a long drive to come to a student ministry that's on the south end. And we've had students visit that way, but the consistency of that is difficult. But man, I want to be a church that if they did drive that far,
it's worth it.
Man, I'm glad I came.
That's good.
Glad I came.
That's really, really good.
Church alive is worth the drive, brother.
That's good. But for my, final thing to ask you, do you what are your life verses and why are they important to you? Or what's your life verse?
Man, my life verse is the table of contents to the maps. Man, that's so hard. I would have to say this, that probably I've got a couple of life verses, and one of them goes back to that desk that's over on the side of my office. In surrendering to a call to ministry, I preached probably my second sermon ever in my home church, Good Hope Baptist Church. And that morning, my mom had got up to pray for me, and I didn't know all of this till afterwards. So I preached that Sunday morning in my home church. And it was that night I was sitting at that desk, and I just really felt like God's call to ministry that night. And I had to go and talk to my mom, and my dad. They were in the living room. I got up from that desk from doing algebra homework, went and sat down next to them and told them, I really feel like God's calling me to go into full-time ministry. And I feel like that I need to go to ORU because that's where he's going to best prepare me for what he's calling me to. I was like, I didn't understand what all that meant. Yeah. And and there's probably people that are listening that won't understand all that means. That's my story. And how God pieces all that together, I don't know. But I know he prepared me in ways that I can look back in my ministry and say, oh, that's why I went there. That's what he was doing. Because it's the rearview mirror that gives us perspective sometimes. But I want to keep my eyes fixed forward. But that morning, my mom opened her Bible and she read this scripture from Jeremiah 1:5. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. And I'm like, man. And I've held on to that since that day. In rough seasons of ministry, I go back to Jeremiah 1:5. And while that was spoken to that prophet in that day, it's an encouragement for me to say, God knew me before he ever made me. He knew what he wanted me to do. And he called me and appointed me to that. He put an assignment on my life for purpose. And maybe the idea is, how do you know that that's what it is? Well, to do ministry, to preach and to teach God's word brings me more joy than anything else I do in life. And I hope people would say this, and you have to talk to other people about it. I hope people say this, that they enjoy me doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And now all of a sudden, this is what I know I love to do. And people love for me to do what I love to do. And they enjoy it. Not for my glory, and not for my name. But, man, that just flows into that. So that verse, Jeremiah 1:5, and then the first scripture that my youth pastor taught me, and I memorized coming home from an FCA camp in his truck, was Hebrews 12:1-2. Therefore, since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us let us throw off every hindrance and the sin that so easily entangles, and run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Let's run, even in agony, run. And let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith.
That's
for
good.
the joy set before him endured the cross, scorned its shame. And he sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Man. And he's coming back one day, bro.
That's right.
And I'm almost 50 years old, and
Well, you don't look it.
yeah, bro. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm wearing my hat. I've got my glasses on and wearing but I'm looking more forward to that day than ever before. And I think as we get older, we continue to get more ready for that. Mm-hmm. But man, if he came back today, great. Man, I'd love for him to wait a little while so that we can reach some more people.
That's right.
Love some more people.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, those are the questions I have, but,
Yeah.
Just to tell people, if you're not subscribed to the YouTube, go ahead and do it. And if you like this episode, leave a comment. And hey, if you're one of the students from First Baptist Lake Park, let me know in the comments. I'd love to say hey to you.
Give us a shout out. Come on, somebody.
And I don't know if there's, if you guys have like an Instagram or anything like that, I can tag that or anything in the description.
We have a student that does an Instagram page for us, and they can always go to our website. Look, we give you all that information and let you tag it.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
But again, I thank you so much for coming on, and I can't wait to see what God does with it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Charlie.
Of course. With another episode of the Young Minds Podcast coming to a close, I just want to remind you that you are never alone and faith is action. So let's get out there.